Of the Conservation Commission on December 15th to order at 7:31 on my phone, and not seeing any public members of the public here, nor having gotten any emails. I think there will be no public comment tonight. So we'll skip right to the item number 2, which is an update on the grant that we talked about last time. And Kate, did you have more information on that?
No, I think we should proceed with a small modified version of it. And I think we can discuss that in an email thread. I don't think
Okay.
it needs to be anything this evening.
Okay. All right. Did we identify the people who were going to be primary on that?
It's probably gonna be me.
Well, I used the word people on purpose. Was there anybody else that, I just don't recall the conversation last time. I didn't know if anybody else had expressed a great interest in helping you out.
I have some interest.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks, Sharon. Okay. Let me just make a note. Wonderful. The next item is the jumping worm program. Talked about, in the last time we talked, of collaborating with the Agricultural Commission, and they were supposed to meet and discuss that. They had wanted to do some research, and they were talking among themselves, and then we were going to coordinate. They unfortunately did not meet as scheduled due to lack of quorum, I believe. But they have invited us to come and dialogue with them at their next meeting, whose date I've forgotten.
I believe it's the 20th or the 21st, so next week.
Next week, thank you. And, right,
Or the 21st, I'm not sure exactly.
okay,
And it's
So-
via Zoom.
yeah, so I know Kate and I were going to attend, and I thought there was someone else who had interest in that subject, and, beyond 3 people, we would have to do a joint session and so forth, but
This is
Was-
just to see if they're interested in
yes, to
do the
see what their
event with
level.
us,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think they want to really talk to us about what are we expecting from them, and so forth, and how would this work, and,
So do you feel like
With
the
the
2 of you
commitment.
are enough to?
Yeah.
oh, I think so.
I would think
Again,
Yeah.
my memory was a little cloudy in the last discussion about if someone else had an abiding interest and wanted to be, part of that at this point.
I'm sure we can join you later.
I can bring up the fact that it was mentioned at the board meeting of the Garden Club also, and they are highly interested in cooperating in any way, putting on programs for the public or however we want to.
Oh, wonderful, because I
I
had,
didn't hear that.
I had,
Were you at the board meeting?
Oh, at the board meeting?
Yeah.
Oh, at the board meeting. I
Yeah.
thought at the general meeting.
No, board
Oh,
meeting.
that's interesting.
I had shot Kathy Wicca an email and just hadn't heard back from her yet.
It's-
Oh, that's great.
So,
Are you the official feedback on that, or is there, do we expect another communication of, I don't
well,
want to put you in the middle. of
no, that's
something
all
that
right.
you-
I mean, I'm on the board, I can certainly pass back and forth any information
Okay.
that's
Yeah,
that's
and I don't see a harm
wanted.
that we do it as 3 organizations and just let the 3
I think
organizations.
the last meeting, we mentioned several organizations
Yeah.
that might be
Yeah.
interested in participating or jointly, maybe not in everything,
No.
but for instance, the Garden Club, I'm sure next year would be happy to have a lecture.
Well, I'm in
Yeah.
charge
A
of that.
public.
And
Well, that's right, you are in charge of that, so,
so we can coordinate with that too.
Yeah, yeah, I thought the scheduling was set for a certain amount of time, but maybe
It's,
later in the
it's
year.
set till,
Yeah, And that's fine, I mean,
Except-
so Robert, was this in the sense that for this first, which would be a virtual discussion by our expert, there would be just willing to be a co-sponsor of that, just, and in my mind, that's just to get a broader reach and have, use that communications channel just to get the word out there. So they seemed interested in perhaps being a
Yes,
co-sponsor on that one?
but
Okay.
It's, I'm not being official when I'm saying this,
Right.
but
That was your sense of it?
that was my sense.
Okay, so we'll, good.
I think maybe getting in touch with Kathy Wick might be the way
Yes,
to make it official.
Yeah. Yeah, as I said, I shot her a note, I just hadn't heard back
Okay.
yet. Okay.
And CC me on that note if you can.
Sure, when I follow up, yeah. Okay. And I'll copy you also, Kate. Okay, excellent. Anything else on jumping worms? And, I mean, the boot brush kind of follows as maybe a prevention measure. We'll see after we go through the lecture.
It's just to add a little bit, in February is the annual Connecticut Flower Show, and there is a lecture there about when worms turn bad or something to that effect, and I have a feeling, it doesn't say it in the title, but I have a feeling it's about jumping worms.
Yeah.
And I will definitely be going to that to just
Okay.
to get some information.
Is that in Hartford or is
It's in Hartford, yeah.
Okay. Next on the agenda is the tree preservation update. And I know Barbara, Paul.
Can you kick it off, Barbara?
We have reached out, Paul and I have reached out to a couple of people, one, or mostly everyone. One person that I tried to get a hold of was Diana, who has not responded to me, so I don't, but as everybody around here knows, I think, because they've talked, everybody's talked, but we're trying to get everybody's idea on what they kind of see they would like to see as far as regulations or whatever in the town. And I did talk quite a bit to Tim today, and he had sent out a paper to Paul and Diana and myself, and it's really a very a wonderful starting point as far as I'm concerned. When we were talking, Tim said, well, because I was telling him my thoughts, and he said, well, that's really sort of what I thought too, and he had already sent this out, so. And it's, I don't know, do we want to get into what we're thinking, or?
I think it would be good to start to, expose that to everybody. We were thinking of having the tree ordinance be part of the subdivision regulations, because it seems like there's a process already in place to kind of track the development of that, of land when it's a subdivision. And so we've discussed some ideas in terms of how the regulations might be worded or included, and you had some of these in your notes too, Tim. Either the diameter of the tree might be a criteria for saving a tree, or also the idea of the perimeter around a lot was also another idea that we had talked about. As we've learned from looking at or benchmarking other communities, different towns do it different ways. Hartford has a very extensive tree regulation. My personal thought is if we had as part of the subdivision regulations and had it be really related to the perimeter of the lot, the area that would be essentially not for a house but for an accessory structure or something else, that we wouldn't be asking people to really give up that much. And if they, and I'll throw this out as an idea, if they decided to cut any trees down in that perimeter area, then they would have to submit a plan for the entire lot to show what their plan was in the entire lot. And the thought that I had was perhaps we would ask people to at least maintain the same foliage cover that the perimeter would have had if they had not touched the perimeter. And just an idea, you know, I know Barbara has talked to a couple other people to get different thoughts too, but I think it would be helpful for the group to maybe have a little bit of a brainstorming session to hear what everybody's kind of individual ideas were.
So are you gonna try to like, gather all the different thoughts and put them in one or a short document and
Yes.
you know,
that's the
distribute
plan.
that, let
Maybe
everybody
Everybody,
read through and then
Right.
try to synthesize?
We haven't gotten input from Diana yet, and
Yeah.
you know, she's frankly the person that has the most expertise of anybody
Mm.
probably on the commission. So
Yeah.
we thought it'd be good to get her input too.
You know, subdivision regulations are under the control of planning and zoning. Ordinances are under the control of the Board of Selectmen, and there's an ordinance committee, I think most of you know. The one I don't know about, and maybe I can get some help from somebody that does know, the building codes themselves are under control of, anybody know? Because those
I
are,
would think the building department.
Yeah, the
could.
building department would some too. Yeah.
it's under the building official, which is separate than land use, is that correct? Okay, so, right, so there, you know, just depending on which way, you know, and maybe the Board of Selectmen will make that choice where things belong. Okay.
One thing that I, perhaps naively, I was interested in the response that Chris Sullivan gave, and pointing out the actual areas where we really do have some tree regulation already. But, and it made me think that maybe we should not really be looking at an ordinance, a separate ordinance, but perhaps, how do I put this? Without more regulation is what I'm trying to say, but more oversight, shall we say, of developers.
Right. So in the current subdivision regulations, the tree provisions are just suggestions, kind of, or recommendations that they look at things, but they're not requirements. So they really don't have much teeth, and they don't require a developer to really do anything if they choose not to. So it'd be nice to have something a little bit more.
Strengthening
Yeah.
some of
When
those
a,
things.
when a subdivision plan comes in, and I've seen a couple, and let me really go back, I guess the one I think about most is the 10 to 14 Merritt Avenue that I've studied the most. That seemed to have a one page of the blueprint plans that discussed trees and landscaping and what was going to be done on the property. That's not a requirement then?
I guess it's just a suggestion.
Yeah, they can surely do anything they want with that page. I mean, the page
Yeah.
might be required, but what they do with it might have.
Well, I mean, strengthening the requirement is
Yeah, so
perhaps.
make it more of a
Because of
requirement
this-
as opposed to just a
Right.
suggestion, and so
Right.
make
I mean, I
make
think,
it a little more prescriptive, so that you know we ask for specific things as opposed to, but not the idea of you know forcing something that doesn't make sense for a particular site. But if we had requirements that were, at least my thought was, either you follow this or you come up with something that's going to be viewed as just as good.
Well, it sounds like we should coalesce our ideas and then bring it to Chris and see how plausible it is.
Sure.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to see well, I'm going to say the three of you, but the two of you and Diana sort of try to synthesize what
what
everybody's
everybody-
thoughts are
Right.
and come up with, the makings of a draft, it doesn't even have to be a full draft, but,
Basically, an
and-
outline would.
an outline, and then,
Right.
and then we can have a pretty good work session around that to flush it out in this, and then bounce it off Chris and any other
Sure.
person that we think that would be affected, because they have more expertise than we do, and then,
Right, so the concern Chris had, was that, we wanted to have something that would be workable
yes,
and wouldn't be burdensome
Yes.
for our group, so.
yeah, and I understand that, I think that's right. David Lover, you have a comment?
What would you do about a developer who was developing a piece of land that was formerly farmland that had no trees on it? How would you regulate that? Just a thought out there.
Then we wouldn't have to save trees there, if they don't have trees.
If they don't
Well,
have
we
trees,
might put
would you
a
want
planting,
that
suggest a
25-foot
planting
perimeter?
plan.
Pardon?
Would you wanna have that 25-foot perimeter affecting that development as well?
Good question.
I mean, that's a
Um,
good question. I mean,
Yeah, it's a good question, but I think keeping it as open space, whether it be trees or shrubs or whatever, but they might also come up with a plan for planting that area, that space.
It's an opportunity for the pollinator pathway of
Yes,
some, native
It
plants.
would go towards the goal of either preserving what was there or, maintaining or adding trees.
mm-hmm.
Right.
Throw it down to-
But I think in general, I mean, as I say, I've not talked to too many people in the group, but I think in general that we're trying not to be onerous to people who live here with their property and their houses and their woods or their fields or whatever. What we're upset with is the developers that come in and do subdivisions and just clear cut the land
I get that.
and, as it were, probably for profit, because wood is very valuable now. So I think that's what we're really pushing to do.
So it sounds like we'll see a synthesis in January.
Yes,
Great.
that's the goal. Anybody else have any comments on it? Any Valerie or Kate, any suggestions?
I mean, when you're soliciting feedback, definitely hit me up, but nothing for tonight.
Okay.
I appreciate the work you're both doing.
I appreciate the word too, and thank you for making that clarification, because I had thought that you were going to plant trees even on farmland. So it's only to prevent and not necessarily to plant.
So some communities have regulations where they want to have a certain amount of foliage coverage. What we were talking about was a little bit different than that. I mean, I think that makes sense in certain circumstances, but we were trying to make it as simple as possible, at least to start with.
That's fair.
Good. Next is the discussion on the budget, approval of the budget. Budgets are due at the end of this month. So I hope to come out of this discussion with consensus of the budget. So I'd like to start with the objectives. That list of objectives for for next year, essentially. I think I've labeled it wrong here. It's really for 2023. The way I've now interpreting the budget package is that the objectives are calendar year. So these would be 2023 objectives. So I'll make that edit. And the dollars are really from July 1st to June 30th. That's what the dollar cycle runs. So think of these are objectives of what we're going to focus on for next year. And I'm not going to read these as I sent them out. So I'm hoping as everybody has, read them, thought them through, and the dollars should go to support these to the extent possible. We don't have a large budget, so we don't, have to find ways not to,
Well, for the benefit of people who are not seeing this,
you know,
it might be worth saying it out loud. But is the overtime and regular, that budget, is that Kathy, basically?
Yes.
And that covers that fully?
That was the estimate we were advised last year to put in, and I have not been advised that it's running under or over that number.
Okay, we maybe should check to make sure that that
Yeah.
is the accurate
Yeah.
cost. 'Cause we don't wanna lose Kathy.
Yeah, no. I assume that that's adequate to cover it. We were not given, and I didn't go press it, what the actuals are yet this year.
Well,
So,
maybe we should know.
yeah. Well, we can find that out. I can check that before we put this in. Okay. But, as I said, I'd like to just get through the objectives, make sure there are any feedback or comments on that, changes.
So the
I should-
printing and binding, what would that cover? What
Okay.
did you have in mind on that?
Printing and binding would be, and very late, so many of you may not have gotten it, but I did send out
You could do that.
the new map from Scrog. So,
It's in your email.
excuse me?
It's in your email.
And so, I've often come in with the very large map, and so I would like to get these reprinted in that large format and mounted, and so that we can use at our events and share, and maybe, maybe even, there might be appropriate places to put them, maybe, for a time, have a display in the library, we could put one there, just to have a few. So that's one type of thing that we would use that for.
Okay. Are we gonna talk about that map tonight?
No, it wasn't on the agenda per se.
Okay.
It was more an FYI that this had come through. I will like to update the Greenway plan with it, since it's more accurate, so I'll do that along with the other couple little changes, 356 ribbon update in the Greenway plan, but no. What I will try to do for next time is to get a sample large one and then let us go look at the two of them side by side, because I think it's a little hard here to look at the old large one and really understand it.
It'd be nice to have something that you could look at from a high level and see what the Greenway path is, like a red dotted line or something
Well,
like that.
this is marked on here down in the legend. You'll see a dark blue is the Greenway Trail.
Oh, okay.
And when this blows up, hopefully,
Hopefully you can see that.
you see it more better.
Okay.
Here, you have to,
I
really look at
I
it.
didn't
And-
see that part of it.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Yep.
Well, just
So-
go back to the budget.
Yeah.
I think equipment and parts, not sure that's the label, but adding a little to that so that we can at least do some project, and maybe it's the I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, and for the equipment and parts, that's noted over on the right-hand side, trail signage and boot brushes.
Yeah, but I
Yeah.
mean, depending on what comes up is the most important thing, but yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's good that we've added a little bit to that.
Yeah.
Do you think that's enough money for signage, especially for the new parts of the trail?
Well, I don't think we'll get all new parts of the trail next year. I think it'll come in over a series of years. There's also recognizing that the trail group is gonna, slowly get to rehabilitating some of the trail entrances, and after they do, then we can contemplate putting up the appropriate signage. And I got some good news this week in talking to the state. The state is apparently for state roads, they seem like they're going to work very collaboratively with the town, and as long as the first selectman makes the request, they will put up and pay for and maintain on an ongoing basis trail safety signage on the roads. So we have a lot of, maybe call it 4 highways that crisscross the town, 4
So it has to
state
be-
roads that crisscross the
Or
town.
just on state roads, not on
That,
town
on the
roads.
state road, so
Okay.
that's a chunk that doesn't have to come out of this budget necessarily.
Okay.
So, we will, the Trails Group again, and we can take a swag at it if you want, but hasn't sort of defined exactly what kind of signage and exactly where they want everything. So this is a swag, admittedly, and I took last year's and I upped it some because I was hopeful we'll pick up a little momentum and we'll be able to do more trails going forward. I mean, truthfully, we haven't done any yet, so I'm hoping we'll, approach spending last year, the money for this fiscal year by the time June 30th comes, as we pick up trail work in the spring, and so I put in a swag for it. So, do I, if I counted every place I think there needs signage, is it enough? No, but I don't think we're going to get to it all in this next year either.
Okay.
Do we need to make a motion to approve?
David wants to speak. Did you want to?
We have a town planner who's looking at the business district, and one of the points that she's making is trying to sell what Woodbridge has to offer. One of it is a trail system, and part of what she was talking about was increasing the signage. So you might coordinate that. You're
That's a
thinking,
good point.
I'm thinking.
What's her
Uh,
name?
Her name is Jeanette Peary.
Can you
Yeah.
put that in the notes, Kath, so we have it?
I had attended one of the sessions, and she was just so busy I didn't get a chance to go up and make contact with her. Is there contact information you can get us for that, or tell me where I would get contact information for her? Because I'd like to follow up on that, because that plan has a lot in it about, just as David said, about the value of the trail system in town.
How about if we
and-
discuss that as a topic next month? Because I think that it's worthy of trying to coordinate more fully with those people, and I have ideas, and I'm sure other people have ideas of how to incorporate the natural beauty in, which is one of the things I went to that meeting too, and one of the things they're trying to do is incorporate some concepts of conservation and natural beauty into the downtown area, and maybe even a little up to East Rock and up to Amity Road. So maybe we could have a brief discussion about that next time,
Sure.
and maybe even have that person come talk to us, or us talk to them
Yeah.
at a meeting.
Is she a consultant or a town employee?
Consultant.
But we're off the topic, aren't we?
Well, we are,
Good.
we are, but we can digress for a couple minutes. Because I think it's important. The 2030 Task Force is the organization that's working with the consultant. And I did approach the co-chairs of that commission. They didn't seem ready to, I offered that we had overlapping thoughts on what they were doing, and then thought in areas, we've done some work already in areas I see sketched out on some of their plans, and they didn't seem ready yet to talk.
Okay.
They said they weren't ready for us, so I'm a little leery of going around them, but I do think it's probably important to get our thoughts to that person.
Yeah.
So we
I mean,
can
we're
talk
ready
about
to
that. Yeah, and so we'll just have to step carefully on that one. Marcel?
Tim, which line item would be when we passed out the maps, at the Diversity Day? Do we have enough of those to pass out?
Well,
And
that would be printing,
That'd be
printing and
pretty-
binding, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
By the way,
That would be a nice thing to pass
Yeah.
out to new, people that move into Woodbridge and to.
Yeah, I mean,
well, the other thing that's happened is that I took the leftovers from the Diversity Day and put them in the library, and they're going like hotcakes.
Are
I
they?
mean, people are taking them.
Hmm.
As a matter of fact, I was just thinking, how am I gonna pick up some more here today, because I'd have to raid the,
the library, that's where I picked them up when I first started and becoming aware that they existed, seeing them in the library and picking them up, so that's great. To put them back there.
Maybe we should
Well,
increase
just
that budget.
talk to
great.
Tony Valinsky and,
oh no, she gave me more.
okay,
And,
oh, good,
but I'm in need of more. I mean, people really are grabbing them.
great,
So is
Sure.
that an adequate budget? I mean, since we're talking
Right.
about
Well,
That's
budget,
the question.
yeah.
we could increase it by $100.
Um, yeah, I think it is. I think it's
I
adequate.
mean, I don't know how much it costs to print, but I know she's being very careful how she gives them out. I think she was astounded when I said I was putting them in the library,
Yeah,
because it,
yeah. I don't necessarily, at the public events, think we should be handing out bunches of them, because I think they're like things that people get and then they just toss them. When they take them from the library, it strikes me, or take them from here, it seems to me they really want them. When you're at a public event like that, it's like every table has something you take, and you sort of take it, but, just to be polite, my sense of it, but, using them as examples there, I think is great.
So should we go back to this budget and decide about it?
Yes.
I just have one question though. I know it's sort of tagged for, boot brushes and signage. If something else comes up more immediately, are we committed to that, or we have some leeway as to how we spend that money?
What you're committed to is the line item.
The dollar amount? Or the?
Well, the category and
Yeah,
the
okay,
dollars.
that's exactly
So,
what I was
so,
thinking.
so if something came up that was another type of equipment,
Yeah,
then yes.
If we
And
got
I-
started and it looked like we needed more money for signage, say we decided to focus on one part of the trail system, is there another source for?
I think you can go to Tony Genovese. I think he said that under $5,000 or under something, he has some leeway to do that.
I don't recall that, but that would be great.
I'm not positive, but that's what my,
Yeah, I
it
mean.
may be wishful
he-
thinking, but.
Yeah, it makes sense. I don't, the Board of Selectmen shouldn't have to get bothered about every nickel and dime. But within reason, and I think Tony has that, would make sense that he would have that judgment through a sense. But I am inclined to thinking about it, maybe to add the $100 back of the,
Printing?
to the printing.
Okay.
Given the input that these have become popular again. So, no, nothing wrong with that. So,
So
thank you
I'll
for the
make a
suggestion.
motion that we approve the budget as you just mentioned, with $100 more for printing.
I second it.
Okay. Any further discussion on that? Okay. All in favor of the motion, pass the budget with the one, looks like it's unanimous. Kathy? Thank you all very much. The next item, properties worthy of acquisition. This is somewhat of a forward-looking item. The preliminary discussion, only just to let you start to think about this. But maybe more than think about it, actually start to, if possible, do some research on your own. We have, the Conservation Commission has traditionally prepared the list of properties worthy of acquisition, and delivered that to the town. And these are properties that would be of value as open space, basically, is probably the briefest I can be in describing that. This list has been a constituent part of the open space plan, which is on our tactical list to do next year, to revise next year. And the open space plan in turn will hopefully inform the plan of conservation and development for the town. So these properties work themselves into the plan of conservation and development, and they are, because they're there, they get looked on favorably. A number of I've come across multiple reference where it asks if property is part of what's referenced in the plan of conservation and development. So it gives them weight to be there, and so we want to.
But Tim, don't we already have that list? It hasn't changed.
Well, I think the list that's there needs to be reviewed, revised, maybe added to, maybe subtracted from.
So, can I just make a comment about this?
Yeah.
I'm starting to get the feeling like it's just busy work. Because I think what we really need to do is decide the 2 or 3 properties that we want to really recommend, instead of just doing this inventory that's been done for 20 years and we haven't bought one property. So it's like, I don't really want to spend a lot of time. I mean, I think that list is there. If there's some that have changed, we should acknowledge that they've changed, like they've been sold or developed. But it's not like new land has appeared in Woodbridge.
No, but
But I feel like we can spend a lot of time just churning our wheels and keeping ourselves busy and never acquiring land, which is really what we need to be doing.
let me read from a note. I asked, in partial answer to your question, I asked Betsy Yagler before she left about this list. And I'll make this comment first. When I first became chair, I asked to meet with Beth Heller to ask about what the town, she had any expectation of the Conservation Commission, so I could be aware of that. And the what came out, the first thing that came out was to prepare the list of properties worthy of acquisition. So, there was an importance put on. And at another, later on, this was months later, and just before Betsy left, I asked what the next step would be with that list. And Betsy's reply was, it'd be useful for conservation to have a list and the reasons why to purchase something, so that when grants become available, you have documentation to rely on. That makes for a stronger grant application. It also makes the commission more intentional about which grants to pursue. So that speaks to just having a ready, up-to-date list of the properties that we might want to purchase if the opportunity presented itself. That doesn't mean it's not the
I'm not opposed to a list.
Yeah.
I'm just opposed to us spending 2 months doing it and
Okay.
it being almost the same as what we've just had for the past 10 or 20 years.
Well, I don't think we need to spend excessive time doing it. But I do think we need to make sure the list that we've inherited is still the right list. For instance, we have defined a greenway plan, and for the properties there that are not either held by the land trust or the park association or by the town, they're in private lands, they're probably become one of them more of a priority and things we should try to acquire. So that's a one source of information for those properties. And the question I was gonna ask tonight and ask people to think about is what are the other sources for us just to think about of properties that perhaps should be on the list that aren't on the list, and just to flesh out the categories so that we can think through it and just make sure that our list is complete. And one of those sources was the previously identified properties. I think we go through theirs and see which ones really make sense.
So we all have that information, or do you want to send it to us?
I can certainly send that out again. It is in the open space plan.
Right, there's a list of
There's a list
40 or
of
50
properties.
properties. So maybe each
No,
one of
it's
us
not-
take 10
not
of them
40.
and,
It's not 40 or 50. It's I think it's closer to 20 to 25, probably.
well, maybe each of us take 5 of them and look at a map and talk to people. I mean, or can't one of us just meet with someone in the town hall and say these are still open space, they haven't changed,
Well, I'm not even sure we have to do that much. I think it's looking through individually, I think, the list and saying, do I know what this is, and just know where the property is and what it is, so that we can collectively say, yeah, that's still worth having or not. And some of us will know that property's, is now been acquired by the land trust, for instance, or that property, like 356 Rimmon Road was one of the properties that was on the list that I saw when I was looking at it a week or so ago. And now that property has been subdivided and we have open space and we have easement, so it's no longer really going to be on the list. So it's just striking those and just collectively using our knowledge to winnow it down. So I'm not looking to spend hours and hours and hours on this. I think it's just getting the list crisped up. I think we can come to a shorter, more condensed list. But I do, my thought was that we'd want to include the Greenway property, so that's pretty self-evident. And I've made that list now, so I have that. And the justification for those is that they're on the Greenway, expansion, so it's pretty self-evident. The previous list is another category, a second category. Properties that we might know are subject to adverse development that we think should be properties worthy of acquisition. Now, I'm not even going to define that term, but if people, when they think about these things, think the development puts pressure on properties, and maybe we want to acquire them to relieve that pressure. And the other category I thought would be the
yay.
welcome. The other category I thought would be the PA 490 properties. So let me level set, Diana. We were, Diana, down to the part of the agenda talking about properties worthy of acquisition.
Okay, thanks.
And just having frame this as sort of a preliminary discussion, so that people can, go back and think about this, and we'll put together, revise. We already have a list that's in the open space plan, but it needs updating, and we want to look at it for completeness. And was suggesting that the Greenway plan we did was one source of properties worthy of acquisition, and to be able to complete that plan. That previously identified properties is someplace we should look at and review. And then I was just talking about the PA 490 properties being a source, because those have been, are identified by the property owners as open space or open forest, but they're not really protected. So some of those maybe we may think of as an important open space, we want to put them on the list. So, I guess I wanted to ask all just to start to take a look at those properties, and I will send out the open space plan again, or give you the link up on the box probably to it, so you can have that. The 490 list, I think it has been sent out, but I'll locate that on box and send that link. The Greenway is obvious, those just come off. And then on your own, I think if there's, what other properties in town, and you may just think about it, if there's other properties that are worthy to acquire in terms of open space and what we would think would serve the town well as open space. And then as we get into next year, we'll talk about, we'll spend some time on it, but not excessive time. I think we can do it pretty quickly. Okay. Any other comments or questions, thoughts on that? Okay.
Perhaps, just because it brings your third area that you spoke about, properties that might be subject to adverse
Adverse development.
development. I had a question, and that was, did you or did anyone speak with Christine about the possibility of our learning about any subdivision plans that come along before we do hear about them?
I have not spoken to her specifically about that. Part of her answer on that will, I'm sure, be the way you can find out about them is sign up for the notifications for wetlands and TBZ, and then you'll get notified of the meetings, see the agenda, and know what's up. I'm sure that'll be part of it.
I know you've said that a bunch of times, but that just
Yeah.
doesn't sit right with me. We're required, or we should be providing input for subdivisions,
Yeah,
so we should be notified as part of the process. We shouldn't be just by chance, stumble upon it.
yeah, well, that's not by chance, that's
It's by chance. for
pretty
me.
organized, that has to be on the agenda, and you would get notified and know
By
ahead
the
of time.
time it's
I
already
think
on
he's
the
saying
agenda.
there
Yeah.
should be a little bit more, if I may, a little more intention behind the communication and inclusion of the commission on certain projects.
Exactly.
Is there-
Exactly,
Yeah.
yeah, that's what,
So
We talked
maybe
about
we
this a
should
couple
make a
times, and
motion
I
that
think
we ask to have
It just
that
needs to
included.
be that way. It's not that hard
Yep.
to send
Do we-
you an email to say, hey, Tim, you should talk to the commission about this upcoming subdivision. I think, overall, we need to refine our process, how we handle subdivisions and requests for open space, because right now it doesn't happen that often, but it's gonna happen a few times probably next year. And we
Mhm.
need to address it better than we have most recently.
And have a real process that we follow, an established process, so that,
Yeah.
we don't.
Can we
Exactly.
make an
Yeah,
official
I-
request?
Is there anything right now, like in the charter, that discusses how the Conservation Commission needs to be involved, or is this a request that we need to make?
I think it's a request we need to make.
it's a request we need to make.
Okay.
So maybe we could make it, vote on it, and make it a
Yeah.
official request.
I don't think we need to vote on it.
Well,
Um,
except we tried to do this last month and it didn't work.
Well, we expressed the same opinion last month.
But
So
it
I
never
I
got
think, I
communicated.
think overall we should have, like, if there's a subdivision that's coming up, you know, the Conservation Commission should be notified. The next step of the process is we should invite the applicant to speak to us about what they would suggest would be open space. The next thing would be the Conservation Commission would come up with a recommendation for open space. We would assign 2 members of the commission to speak to the planning and zoning board with regard to explaining what our request would be for open space, so that it's kind of,
Maybe we can put that
Inclusive.
very thing
it's,
in.
you know, it goes from start to finish. Otherwise, you know, we're gonna miss stuff like what happened with Manila Avenue. Maybe because that was only, you know, 2 additional lots, it wasn't the end of the world, but, you know, they didn't understand what our request was and why we had even come up with that suggestion.
I mean,
Yeah,
TP&Z and wetlands get informed of stuff. I mean, TP&Z obviously does, so when TP&Z gets informed of a subdivision, you can be sent an email.
Right, and we had a special meeting to discuss Manila Avenue because we hadn't been notified ahead and we couldn't discuss it in a regular meeting, so it's kind of dysfunctional, and I think just a simple process would be easier for everybody that's involved going forward.
I wanted,
Kathy, if you put this in the notes, that would help us remember what we're doing.
yeah, I wanted to, say that I did attend the TPZ along with Tim, and, our efforts were recognized. They mentioned our committee several times. They mentioned the letter that Tim had wrote several times, but it was being presented by the attorney for the developer. So, it may be a,
So that was the problem, is there was only one, there was Tim's letter, and it was described by the attorney for the developer who said, this is a letter that we got from our esteemed Conservation Commission, it's not necessary. And so there was only one side presented, and it was unfortunate because I think there was some discussion around why, what you had suggested with the,
So they voted it down?
they voted it down, they said,
voted
it
it
doesn't
down.
make sense.
And
yeah,
I think also in conjunction with this, we need, in a very diplomatic way, to try to get the TPs and Z to understand a little bit more what we're trying to do with conservation and the 10% and so forth and so on.
Maybe we should make a presentation to TP&Z instead of having them come to us. Maybe 2 or 3 of us can go to them.
Yeah, but I think specifically for open space with regard to a subdivision, we should have a process where 2 of us go there and speak to them about what we're advocating, so that they understand why, you know, why, because one person, as you mentioned, Tim, held up regulations that were dated, weren't even the current ones, a member of the board, and another member of the board said, their proposal doesn't make sense, I don't know why they want a sidewalk from nowhere to nowhere, or something to that effect. So they just didn't understand why we were,
There was no context.
yeah,
Correct.
there was nobody, you know, the developer didn't want to give up 1 inch of land, and that was the only side they heard, which was unfortunate.
That's terrible.
Do we need to make a motion?
So,
What?
Do we need to make a motion to do this?
Yeah.
yeah.
Tim seems to have some reservations on this. I'd
well,
love,
no, we branched off and started talking about a different, almost a different topic. So there's, you know, being aware of what's coming up in subdivisions, in the one. A process that we work to have TPZ have a better understanding of the open space for a particular subdivision, to me, is something different. So let me talk to each of them separately. I am aware of the same discussion we had last time. I just haven't yet had a conversation with Chris about how this could be communicated to us. And what I've been trying to think through is how to do it without putting burden on her or her staff and increasing the process there. So I've had a couple thoughts, but I have not contacted her yet.
You know,
When an application for a subdivision comes in, TP&Z are notified and wetlands are notified
Yeah.
automatically. What is the burden for a third commission to be notified
You know,
at that point, which is the very beginning? That's when they first hear about it.
Otherwise, we're a mockery of being helpful. I mean, we can't ask Chris Sullivan not to spend 10 minutes on us in a month. That's just not, I mean, she's a very efficient, effective, delightful person. I can't imagine that she's not willing to do that.
And I hesitate to speak for her, but I'm just
Well, then let her
extrapolating from
speak
what
for herself.
when
If
I've
she
heard her
doesn't want to,
comments.
she can write us a memo and tell us why it's not working. You don't have to block us from asking this of her. She's capable of telling us why it doesn't work.
Maybe
and it-
David would like to weigh
Educate
in
us.
here.
Yeah, I think the question is, does this board have an interest in this particular subject?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the lens that you should frame this in. So if you
That's-
feel you
that's
have
helpful.
an interest,
Well, and we do. I mean, we clearly do.
and you also have this 10% set aside,
Yep.
which if it's not a regulation, at least is a precedent. So you have a foot in the door here.
Right.
Mhm.
So
think the
do
problem
you have
is
a
that
recommendation on, what, do you have a recommendation as to what the commission, the best approach that we should take with this matter?
Well, I think the first recommendation would be that you should be notified of these
Applications?
developments that are contemplated.
The application, that's the
The
beginning.
application.
Okay.
And the second thing is, do you want to have, something with the force of the regulation, with the force of law behind it, like what wetlands does, that say you have a right to approve this based on this setting aside whatever you feel is appropriate, 10%. If you already have that, but you don't want it as a suggestion, you want it as something which is a legitimate concern and, something which is backed by the town.
So I will complete the item on it's still on my to-do list, which I've never taken off and never intended not to do, but I will complete it to ask Chris to give us notification.
That would be a good start. I think that overall, we should have a process that we follow for a subdivision that says, these are the steps that we follow. I think those steps should include the applicant coming to speak to us of what they would suggest would be open space in the subdivision, so that when we come up with a recommendation, we're not coming up with a recommendation that might be contrary to a good idea that they might have had. And so it doesn't have to be a long process, but there is some dialogue with us in terms of what we recommend, or what they recommend, or what they would suggest for the open space. We listen to their concerns, we come up with our own recommendation, and that's what we submit to planning and zoning. When that does happen and there's a public hearing on it, we have 2 members that go to the planning and zoning that advocate for what we recommend. So that when there's a subdivision like Manila Avenue last week, and they have a question in terms of why we're recommending something, we can explain it to them. I think if they had understood what our recommendation was, they might have been more open to it. They might have decided differently, but at least they would have been open to what we were recommending.
Paul, I have a question. Would you be willing to write your thoughts now, since they seem
Yep,
very
absolutely, I can do
coherent?
that, yeah.
Give it to Tim to convey to all of us, and then.
Yeah, I'd say it's gonna be step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that's what we do for a subdivision.
Hopefully
May I-
just
may I
3
say
steps.
something? Also, it seemed to me, and you might be able to agree, you saw the video.
I did, yes.
It seemed to me that TP&Z was in the discovery phase themselves. Or did you get that impression that they had just visited the Manila site themselves and was asking basically preliminary questions? That was my impression, that they had just visited and then they voted on it. And I think partly because there wasn't a lot of opposition to the favor of the vote.
So the other thing is too, that I guess it's different from what we work on, but, you know, I think when there's a subdivision, there needs to be better notifications of the neighbors, because the neighbors didn't feel that they knew when the hearing
It was
was.
the wrong date or something,
Right.
correct?
Yeah, there was there was a mistake in,
Misprint.
on the website, but the legal notice had the right date, so therefore technically it was the right date, but
But nobody
it
heard it,
should be-
nobody knew about it.
nobody knew about it. So I think that should be another step of the process for a subdivision that not necessarily impacts us or what we
Conserving it.
do, but that, you know, that there's better notification that goes out to the
Would it make
neighborhood.
any sense that if we're plugging for a 10%, that we should go to the TP&Z meeting and present it to them? Because
Absolutely, that's what I
I mean-
That's
recommend.
what,
yeah.
that's what he's saying.
Yeah,
That's what you're saying, and that's
Paul
what-
is talking about 2 people going. So, what,
At least 2 people.
Diana, go ahead.
Thank you. So the other thing I don't want to lose, what David contributed, is that that not only do we request to be notified, but that there is some type of authorization, authority that this commission has to approve the, recommendations for conservation in the subdivisions. So that if there is, something really glaring at us that seems inaccurate or seems like the wrong choice, for a development, that, we can have some type of authority there to intervene, with the town's best interest in mind.
But with the last development, we did have the authority. The attorney was asking not to waive it, isn't that, to waive the 10%? But that was part of our authority, was to ask for it, and instead they requested to waive it, the 10%.
And do like a payment in lieu of or something, or?
They didn't do
No,
that,
they
they
didn't
just
do
asked
anything.
to have it
They
waived.
just asked to have
which
it
was a little
waived, and
bit
it was waived.
backwards. They didn't even
It
know
was
why we
waived.
were suggesting it.
Great.
Well,
So,
so we,
Thank you.
just to,
we
I
are,
will volunteer to write a process. It'll be simple.
I don't know how much more time we have to spend on this particular item. I think
yeah.
he's going to write a process for it. The minutes reflect what you're gonna follow up on.
We're gonna come to close.
Kate's ready, Kate's got class next.
I do.
And,
Oh, that's
you know, I think crystallizing the thoughts would be good, if you want to write those down, Paul.
Okay.
And then
But
maybe we
my-
can take an action next.
my-
Sorry, Tim.
Okay.
There was a suggestion last time, Paul, I believe you made, that we have Rob Klee come and visit with us. And my thought was that would be a good forum to have the discussion with him of how he thinks we could best interact with planning and zoning to make sure that there is good understanding in his commission as they entertain the open space and the subdivisions, and just get his buy-in to that for a process, because I think that'd be important, rather than
us telling
kind
him
of,
what we'd like to see too, not just.
well, that would be, it'd be a dialogue
Yeah.
when he's here, and we can have that exchange of ideas and come and,
If
you know,
need
rather.
To get on the same page as them, because right
Yeah.
now we're not.
Right, and I'm gonna expand at the risk of delay here a little bit more, because I was gonna comment on this a little further. That in dealing with the Manila Avenue, which has been said it was denied for being just too small, not of benefit to the town because it was so small, it did betray a lack of understanding. It also betrayed, the whole discussion seemed to betray a real lack of the understanding of the open space,
Concept,
what word?
concept.
Well, yeah, I think maybe the concept's understood a little bit, but the import of the regulations that are the subdivision regulations, they really don't have depth of understanding of that and what the intent is and what the in terms of a planning function that they're supposed to be trying to achieve, and we have to figure out how to educate them to that. And, maybe that starts again with a discussion with Rob. And it was really brought out as Val said, and I was telling Paul, they held up the regulations and were thinking about this proposal in terms of the wrong regulations. So it was very disappointing. So I'm hoping
The bottom
through
line
that
is we
mechanism.
should have been at that meeting to pitch our thing. That's where we fell
And they
short.
should be very,
We should
Well,
be the
we-
body representing our own
Yeah.
recommendation
Well,
and
well,
not
we-
the attorney of the
we-
developer for
we-
sure.
Yeah.
We had the recommendation that we had, and it was clearly written out, but they
Yeah, but we
didn't
need to
get
be
it.
there.
They didn't get it.
They
Well,
only heard one
and-
side.
and-
We have to
as-
help them get it.
And when those discussions happen, and that the need to get the open spaces resides only with TPC, unfortunately.
But, so I
For
guess
now.
the
but-
question
but-
is that
For now.
we need to ask Mr. Klee if we can represent our own recommendations to them.
Yes, in some way have input into his commission before they
Right.
make, because they go into those sessions and then there's nobody else gets to comment. It's the way it works. So, with that, I think we're wrapped up in just approval of the minutes. Is the next agenda item, approval for 11:17 and 12:1. And unless there's gonna be discussion, I'd like to move them both together for approval, unless anybody has. Okay, so I'm gonna motion that we approve.
Well, wait. So Kathy, was the discussion about, talking to Dr. Klee in here? You suggest the commission talks to TP&Z, in which this would, Klee, chairman, and discussing work together. Okay. I just wanna make sure that we have the little innuendos of our conversation in there, because some of it seems to be important, even if there's no motions involved.
Okay, so, again, unless somebody has changes, I'll motion that we approve the 11:17 and 12:1 minutes as submitted. Need a second? Anybody like to second the motion to approve?
second,
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor?
Abstention.
And-
I didn't read them, so.
Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, I can't count. 1, 2, 3,
Six.
4, 5, 6 in favor and an abstention by Paul. And motion's passed. Thank you. So the last item is member comments. I kind of hope to be wrapped up, but I do have. Does anybody, before I have a few comments, anybody else have anything,
I have-
comments?
The last meeting you mentioned you were gonna check with the state to see what the process was for
I'm gonna
their
talk to them.
recognition.
I'm gonna talk to that in just a
Okay.
minute. Yeah.
Okay.
I'd like to talk about what we want on our next meeting's agenda.
Sure.
So we want to bring up this TP&Z issue again. We want to, talk about
The
Chris Sullivan,
TPZ issue,
us presenting and what Paul's gonna come to us with
okay.
the,
So review with Paul.
and also how we're gonna get clear line of communication between Chris Sullivan and developments that are gonna be occurring, and make sure that we have that communication as soon as TP&Z has it and as soon as wetlands has it.
I'm not sure that will need to be an agenda. I'm
Well,
gonna
I'd like
write
to-
Chris as a,
But
I'm
you,
gonna-
I'd like you to tell us what she says as an
Oh, well,
agenda item.
Of course,
Okay.
Yeah.
I just don't want it to get lost.
no,
Are,
won't get lost.
You feel more comfortable having it as an agenda item?
I do.
are we inviting the head of TPZ,
At
To
some,
come. but not next meeting?
I doubt for next meeting,
But maybe he could be invited for the March meeting.
yeah.
Can we
That
invite him
type of
for
thing.
that?
Yeah,
Oh, we have one every.
I don't want another subdivision come slipping through here.
Well, Tim, were they going to discuss the Merritt Avenue in January?
yeah,
Yes?
I think for
So
that, we
would-
should have two people assigned to speak on behalf of the Conservation Commission.
It's a good recommendation.
Have we did we move forward with our proposal from
That was done, yeah.
months
Yeah.
back? We
Yes.
Tim sent him a memo.
Tim sent
have, oh,
it.
okay, this is for Merritt Avenue.
For Merritt Avenue, so I
Yes.
guess
Okay.
we'd have the proposal or the recommendation we sent to them. But we'd also,
There-
for public comment, if
there's a
that's the
public
right
hearing,
place.
there's a public hearing at the January TPZ meeting.
And then, so,
That's January 5th, will that be, or January 1st week in January?
I think it's the 5th, right?
Yeah, I think so.
I think that's what you said
So
last
that's
time.
before our next meeting.
Yeah, that's
So we
right,
need to
correct.
plan for it
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
Thank you, Valerie.
Okay.
So Tim and
So-
Valerie seem, or no, sorry, sorry. Paul and Valerie seem familiar.
I'll volunteer.
Do you want to volunteer to
I'll volunteer.
represent?
Valerie, would you like to join me?
Join you? I would like to help you write the process up.
Okay.
I could be the third man.
Well, I mean, the recommendation for the
Yeah, to speak to the planning and
To
zoning.
Merritt,
Merritt Avenue one.
On the
sorry.
Merritt Avenue recommendation.
I don't know if I want to be the second. I think I'll volunteer to be third.
Okay.
But
I didn't go to the site visit, but I'm happy to join you if you'd like me to be there.
That'd be
Okay.
great.
Great.
Any other
I
comments,
can't hear what they're saying.
before I,
Diana's gonna go be the second and you'll be the third.
Oh, okay, thank you.
So the three of us will go.
Okay.
no,
Can we meet oh, we can't, we would not be allowed to meet before that, because it's three people.
you can talk,
I don't think that's a quorum.
you can
that's
talk.
not a
That's-
quorum.
Is
Yeah.
it? Okay, okay.
The three is okay.
Mhm.
Is it party?
Okay. So, guess we covered 9 Manila Avenue enough.
And Merritt.
And the Merritt is covered. So let's start with the item Paul brought up. I did reach out to the state. And good news there, to recognize our expansion of the Greenway seems like it'll be a simple process. We have to resubmit the application, but since we've already had a Greenway recognized, it'll be a simplified process, I guess I would say. They look favorably on people expanding greenways, and so it will get. And my question was, I didn't know, how much of it had to be real, it had to be walkable or that type of thing, and I think it seems to be the intention is enough. If the
Makes sense.
description is substantial, and they'll recognize that the nature of this is going to be progressively achieved.
Great.
So there's a little bit of an application attached to the Greenway document, and they sort of do a once a year announcement around the March-April timeframe, and then they have a little announcement, I think, in April or something. So we'll
So-
probably hit that.
Would you do that application or would we all do
Yeah,
it?
it's a pretty simple application. I don't think I brought it with me, but I might have. But, no, I did bring it with me. You just keep that all together, but first 2 pages of the application, there are some old documentation I was starting to gather to attach to it in terms of the first, the first time around, the Board of Selectmen had to pass a motion that they were, I guess, essentially in favor of the Greenway, they're supportive of the Greenway. This time around, it doesn't seem necessary, it's an expansion. So we'll go forward on that basis.
Oh, it's the third, okay.
I think I mentioned the new Greenway map, I'll add that to our document. The third item, I know you were interested in some of the work of the town trail group. And this past weekend, the group worked on the trail that goes from Rimmon Road into the Fitzgerald property, opened that back up. And there's some thought now that I think of putting up just a small, simple sign of this nature. I don't know if you can see these from way over there, but, standard trail signs just to be able to have people recognize where that goes. The state, it was a state road, and so the state requires it to be outside the right-of-way onto town land, and so we would, I think when that group is ready to go forward with that and kind of figures out what they want, we'll
So
come.
is that by Ranch Road then, or?
It is by Oak Hill.
Okay, so it's closer to Oak Hill, okay.
Yeah, is Ranch the one that's very close to Oak Hill?
It's the
It's
next street
not
down.
Yeah, so it's in between.
It's my street.
Right, yeah.
And if you go by there now, you'll see it's kind of open, you'll see.
Okay.
And but when that town trails group gets ready to do that, we'll kind of come back to us, as through me, and to take some funds for signage and we should spend that there.
So for clarification on the state approval of the Greenway expansion, is there a deadline we have to get the application into them by, or?
Well, they do it, they do their approvals, they meet monthly,
Okay,
and they announce in, I believe they told me, March.
So if we get this in the next month, it's likely
In
to be
the
part of
next
it.
couple months, we should be
okay,
Next
fine.
couple
Yeah.
months.
great,
Yeah.
good.
All right, and I think that's it. I get on,
So should we follow up that next month to make sure that's getting in, Tim? Because it sounds like it does have a time frame. It just things, I won't remember it otherwise.
it's on my plate. I'll take care of it.
Okay.
Maybe you could just give us an update to let us know where you're at on
Yeah, let us know if you need any help with anything.
it. Yeah.
Okay. Would someone like to do this, fill this out? I'll take any
Sorry,
help
what was that
anybody
again?
wants to get.
Yeah.
I'm happy to have anybody take any of these items. So, just let me know. I think that was it on my list. Anybody, anything else? So, I guess I will,
Happy holidays, everyone.
yes, I would.
Should we close meeting to?
Make a
Yeah.
motion to adjourn.
Yeah, before we do, thank you everybody for your work this year.
I would like to
We made
thank
progress.
our great videographers too.
Yay.
Thank you, and sound.
Thank you all.
And notes taking,
Yeah.
Yes, oh
thank
my
you for
God,
taking
and
minutes,
obviously,
thank you.
Yeah.
We love you.
And David
So-
for all his help this year too.
Yeah.
And so we entertain a motion to adjourn?
I so move.
Second.
And we'll close our meeting at 8:50. I think